How great does it feel to be the people who know that God is more important than Seahawks? Did I say that? I do have to tell you that I am down for football church. I've had requests for halftime scores in the middle of the sermon. And it does appear that we may be able to get the second half of the game in the fellowship hall after the service, so you might want to stick around for that. But on to today's agenda. Our reading is from the book Soul Currency. I'm on page 37. This is our book of the month. The topic today is spiritual assets. Spiritual assets are universal, and they are unlimited in scope. Anyone who recognizes and embraces his or her own spiritual assets can effectively access their power. For example, Thomas Alva Edison used intuition and imagination to design the electric light bulb and many other inventions. James Watt used these same two spiritual assets to design the steam engine. Later on, Gordon Moore, founder of Intel, used them to innovate microprocessors. Spiritual assets are an open energy field of possibilities or divine imprint of the Creator that you and every person on earth are endowed with in some measure. Just to repeat that one little part, you and every person on earth are endowed in some measure with spiritual assets. Capitalizing on your spiritual assets requires more than developing a simple awareness of them. After you recognize your spiritual assets, you must embrace and incorporate their aliveness, power, and value in everything you do. You have the ability to shape your world creatively through your clarity of intention and the choices you make. Your spiritual assets have great value only because you use them in meaningful ways that build value and contribute to the good of the world. I'm going to read through our affirmation one time, and then I'll invite you to stand and join me. I am at one with the source of eternal flow, and my life is rich and fulfilling. Calling forth a full and satisfied consciousness, I live my life on purpose, confidently placing my demand upon the universe and surrendering to its fulfillment. I allow the divine current to flow through me as loving relationships, perfect health, meaningful activity, and complete financial freedom. Please stand and join me with conviction. I am at one with the source of eternal flow, and my life is rich and fulfilling. Calling forth a full and satisfied consciousness, I live my life on purpose, confidently placing my demand upon the universe and surrendering to its fulfillment. I allow the divine current to flow through me as loving relationships, perfect health, meaningful activity, and complete financial freedom. And so it is. Hallelujah. Thank you, Lori Jones. That's a blessing, isn't it? You know, we've been given an incredible gift, haven't we? The gift is called life. Like, what else is there? What more could we have been given? And not only were we given a physical body that breathes and has all it needs to move forward in this thing called life, we were given some internal spiritual assets or spiritual gifts. Did you know that? The question is, how big are you living your life, and how well are you investing your spiritual gifts? Because the fact is, you know, if you invest $10 in a 10% return account, in not very long, you're going to have more than $10, right? In the same way, if you invest your spiritual gifts, your spiritual assets in the world, they will earn interest for you. And I don't mean interest like money, although it could show up that way. I mean interest like things that actually enrich your life, things that make the world a better place, things that create a greater sense of spiritual good on planet Earth. I don't know about you, but I'd kind of like to be part of that. Yeah? Sound pretty good? So what is a spiritual asset? Well, any asset, what is an asset? An asset is anything of value, right? I mean, this podium, sad as it is in some ways, is an asset that we own here at Unity, right? Perhaps you own a home, perhaps you own a car, whatever those things are, those are assets. Those are things that you own that have value. In the same way, you have spiritual assets, those positive inner qualities, natural abilities, divine gifts that count for something in the world. And depending on how well we use those and how well we fuel those and what we fuel them with, key point, they have the potential to allow us to be anything because all things are possible in God, right? We all know that, right? All things are possible in God. And so these qualities are God-given. They are unlimited potential. They are given to us in order to fuel our journey of life, and they are where our true value lies. Sometimes we get a little confused and we think that bottom number on the balance sheet is what makes us valuable or not. Anybody? And I'm not saying that bottom number on the balance sheet is not important, because it is. But it is not where our value lies. Our true value lies in the God-given talents and gifts that we've been given, and how well we express those shows our appreciation for those gifts. Now, an interesting thing about spiritual gifts, or assets, spiritual assets, is they are powered by love. Because what do we say? We say God is love. Love is the infinite power, the universal presence. Love is that which powers all things. And when we magnify our spiritual assets by powering them with love, that is setting a loving intention and then behaving from that place, we start to see returns on that investment like nobody's business. When we try and magnify those gifts with very human base qualities like greed, trying to get more, those kinds of things, if that's our only motivation, yeah, we might get something, but we're not going to get satisfaction and fulfillment. Right? So if satisfaction and fulfillment is your goal, my goal. If satisfaction and fulfillment is your goal, identify those spiritual assets, those spiritual gifts, anchor them in the power of love and heartfelt intentions to do good in the world, and all else will be added unto you. Are we good so far? So what are these spiritual assets? Well, according to our book of the month, Dr. Ernest D. Chu, basically in his way of thinking about these things, there are 4 types of spiritual assets, and we use them in combination in order to create a result in our lives. We get to choose which ones we use. Isn't that interesting to me? We have way more spiritual assets than we could ever use. I really believe that, because God is what? Infinite and unlimited. We have unlimited spiritual gifts and spiritual assets, way more than we could ever use, and so we must choose what we want to express most fully here on planet Earth in this gift that we call life. The first of the spiritual assets that he identifies is intuition and guidance. Have you ever just had a hunch? You just knew something? A couple times in my life I've actually even had a voice that was like, boom, this. And I went, oh, are you kidding? But yes. See, intuition and guidance is the first of our spiritual assets. These are things like divine ideas that seem to come out of nowhere, intelligence and wisdom, faith. For me, actually, let me put it this way. I've always had some sort of faith. Some days it's been a stronger faith than others. But I've had the gift of faith in the universe to some degree. Does that make sense? And what I realize is that the more I put my attention on the faith, the more it has grown. Do you see? When I've invested in that spiritual asset, that is the asset that has grown. Sometimes I've allowed myself to stay anchored in fear. And the more I put my attention on my fears, what has grown? My fears, right? And so our spiritual assets that have to do with intuition and guidance are things like faith. They are things like intelligence and wisdom, a sense of divine purpose in the world, or even worldly purpose in the world, inspiration, the still small voice, all of those things. And sometimes it comes through dreams. Sometimes it's just a feeling that we have. Sometimes we hear a still small voice. Sometimes we just have a hunch. But you see, when we identify those as divine gifts and recognize them for what they are and recognize that they are unlimited and begin to invest in them and cultivate them, they grow and they enrich our spiritual experience of life. I want that. So how do we cultivate this first spiritual asset of intuition and guidance? You gotta listen. Does that make sense? How many times have you had that hunch, or you've had that still small voice, or you've felt a sense of wisdom about something and then you didn't go down that path? You didn't follow it. Yeah, you know what? Basically what I'm saying when I do that, because I've done that too, what I'm saying when I've done that is I don't trust myself. I don't trust my inner wisdom. I don't trust the universal wisdom, the universal presence of God as wisdom in me. And then what does the law say? That's right, it's not trustworthy. That's not true. Don't trust that. See, and I'm putting my energy in the fear rather than in the faith that there is an intelligence within me. It's a gift I've been given to help me navigate this human life more effectively. Intuition and guidance, the first type of spiritual asset. The second type of spiritual asset that Dr. Chu talks about is creativity and imagination. How many of you have ever said, "Oh, I'm just not creative"? Right? I know. I hear that from people all the time. I'm like, really? Did you get dressed this morning? Did you put together that outfit? That's an amazing outfit. How creative of you. Did you buy those shoes? You saw those in the store and you saw them on your feet. And you created yourself like styling in those cool shoes. Have you ever solved a math problem? See, that's a creative act. Have you ever helped a kid get dressed? Have you ever fed a child? How are we going to get this kid to eat? That's a creative act. We're using our creative mind. See, we tend to think of creativity, it's music, it's art, it's color, it's those kinds of things. And yes, it is that. We're creating something new, oftentimes out of what seems like nothing, or we're creating something new out of resources that weren't like what we've created. And certainly many of us are gifted in that way. Those are spiritual assets for some of us. Like, I really like to sew. And it's amazing to me sometimes how this pile of fabric can end up looking like this handbag over here. It kind of blows my mind. Like, how did that happen? Well, how it happened was tenacity, perseverance, imagination, creativity, willingness to follow directions. Oh my gosh. That's a tough one for me. That's how that happened. And so the spiritual asset of creativity is bigger than just being able to paint a picture or write a song. We are all creating all the time. We are creating machines. And when we stand in our spiritual asset of creativity, we stand in our power. Because this is where we're duplicating the nature of the infinite spirit that we call God. What does God do? God does nothing but create. That's it. The podium, the chair, the you, the cat, the this, the that, that's all God does. And when we lean into our creative gift, we are being more godlike. Like, how cool is that? And nothing is impossible for God. So when we rest in our creativity, we are truly walking in our spiritual power, cultivating the spiritual gift, the spiritual asset, investing in that way? Have you ever cooked anything? Have you ever planted a plant and took care of it? Have you ever done anything like that? On page 51 in the book, Ernest Chu says this about creativity. Creativity is the spiritual asset that gives you the ability to imagine and respond to the great flow of life. When you let your creative energies flow, you become a shining channel for spirit. You will often be amazed at what flows out of you. Then he goes on to say, change is inevitable. The universe is always shifting. Sometimes I resist that piece a little bit. How about you? Our creativity allows us to evolve, adapt, and transform, and what arises is often more expansive than what it replaces. Our inner fountain of creative genius enables us to sense ourselves as alive and in motion, and as I would add, in cooperation with the universe. And I got to tell you, when I'm working in cooperation with the universe, great things happen in my life. And when I start pushing back against it, I don't want it to be that way, suddenly my life doesn't go as well. Just a thought that you might want to ponder on. So how do we develop this spiritual gift more fully? Ready? Let go of judgment. Release all sense of judgment about anything you are creating in your life. See, how can our creativity flow when we're always questioning whether we did it good enough or whether they did it good enough? We simply release any sense of judgment and anchor in the flow and let it flow. And that doesn't mean we don't use our discernment and choose and go, oh, well, that didn't work out so well. I guess we'll try this one over here, right? So it doesn't mean that we release our discernment. What we are releasing is our judgment that things have to be a certain way before they can be okay. Anybody besides me do that? So just rest in that idea for a moment. What if I just said yes to the divine flow in me and allowed whatever came out to be the thing that came out? Boom. The third spiritual asset Dr. Chu describes are character traits. These are things that we've been given. We can also develop these, right? The things that we've been given that he talks about as character traits are things like discernment, empathy, persistence, kindness, courage. Some of us seem to have a greater capacity for these than others. And what I really believe is that we all have a great capacity for kindness and courage and empathy and all of these things. But once again, these are characteristics that have to be cultivated. But they are spiritual gifts we've been given. Have you ever empathized with someone who is in pain? Have you ever stood in your fear and done it anyway? If you have, that means you have these spiritual assets. And as you continue to invest them more fully in your life, they will continue to reap returns for you. Have you ever been optimistic in a tight spot? Have you ever wished you could be more optimistic in a tight spot? See, you can develop these traits by cultivating them, by practicing being optimistic. You just have to notice, what am I doing and what do I want to do instead? See, this is the whole thing, right? This is the whole teaching in a nutshell. You got to be able to notice, what am I doing? What am I thinking? How am I being in the world? And is that really where I want to be? Noticing, however, is often a challenge and is also a spiritual asset that must be cultivated. Is one of these characteristics or character traits, if you will, that we must cultivate in order to allow those gifts to manifest more fully in our lives. And so the question is, how do we develop these traits of empathy and discernment? And there's kind of two ways. The first way, I think, is just to practice, right? You notice and you practice. Somebody's in pain. Am I being empathetic or am I being judgmental? And then practice the one that you want. Do you want to practice judgment or empathy? I have to say, sometimes I'm really tempted to practice judgment. There's a part of me that just really like, and yet that keeps me really anchored in the dysfunctional human self, doesn't it? When what I could be practicing is empathy and kindness and compassion. So the first thing you got to do is just notice what you're doing and make a choice. But the second thing that is even more instructive for me in many ways is when I am in the feeling of judgment, or when I am unable to empathize with someone else's discomfort, or when I am unable to be optimistic in a tight spot, to ask myself a quality question instead of, what's wrong with the world? It's always like this. Yeah, that's not a quality question, right? I want to ask myself a quality question. A quality question is something like, I'm feeling judgmental. What is mine to learn here? Let me say that again. I'm feeling judgmental. What is mine to learn here? I'm feeling angry instead of empathetic. What is mine to learn here? What is this experience here to teach me? And I promise you, it's probably here to teach you something about love. Remember, we're developing these spiritual assets using the power of love as the motivating force, the motivating factor. And if we're standing in courage, if we're standing in empathy, if we're standing in kindness and compassion, and then something comes up that makes us not feel courageous or not make us feel like being mean and not compassionate, what is mine to learn? Because I made a commitment to be powered by love. Oh, you mean I actually have to practice? What? Yes, because that's how we get good at anything. And so we develop the character traits that grow us, that are our spiritual aspects, by asking ourselves, what is mine to learn? Allowing our guidance and intuition to inform us, and then moving forward effectively with that information. And then the fourth type of spiritual asset that Ernest Chu discusses are cultivated skills. Cultivated skills and knowledge. Like many of us went to school and we learned some things, right? We might have an education in a particular field, or we might have a general education. These are cultivated skills and knowledge. These two are gifts, because where did they come from? They came from the infinite. Remember that thing about trace it back? Where did that college class you took and learned so much about yourself come from? Well, it came from the mind of some professor, and the college itself came from the mind of someone who saw the value of education for the masses. And that came from, and that person, that came from the mind. And if you trace it all the way back, it came from the mind of what? God. It came from the infinite mind. All things are created twice. And so that knowledge, that skill building that you experience from in whatever formal education you have, is a spiritual asset. And as you invest those, you will grow. There's also things like, I used to be, really hard to believe, I'm sure. I used to be kind of socially awkward. And I never knew how to conduct myself in groups of people. And it was because of false beliefs about myself, right? And so I would either be really loud and gregarious, or I would be really shut down, one or the other, because I never could find the middle thing, right? I had to learn to be socially adept. And I think I do all right now, for the most part. Sometimes I get a little into the old habits, But you see, that's a cultivated skill. I learned to be more socially present and aware and conscious. So these cultivated skills the way to develop these skills is just to say yes to whatever opportunity is in front of you. What is the learning opportunity that's in front of you? We're offering a class, take it. Somebody else is offering a class that catches your attention, take it. I've been going to go back to school for 10 years. Go. Just do it, because that still small voice is saying to you, there is more for you to learn. The moment it catches your attention, there is more for you to learn. And then I feel like, well, I don't have time, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, whatever. Okay. And the universe says yes. And you don't have time to develop and cultivate those skills and that knowledge. Yes? But if you know what? If we listen to that still small voice, and we simply declare to ourselves, the universe is in a conspiracy for my good, and time is expanding to meet every desire of my heart, and everything I want to do that creates a more fulfilling and satisfying life for me is provided effortlessly and easily, and I have plenty of time to take part in it. It's all in the story we tell ourselves, isn't it? What's the story we tell ourselves? And as we cultivate these spiritual assets, as we activate the flow of these spiritual assets in our lives with heartfelt intentions that are anchored in love, we become all that God would have us be in that moment. And then we take the sacred breath and we do it again, and we're all that God would have us be in the next moment. Somewhere in this book he says, in the same way that gravity holds us on planet Earth, love directs the flow of our spiritual assets. Like gravity holds us down to the earth, love directs the flow of our spiritual assets. And so our unique expression of love allows us to consciously shape our experience of life in the world that we live in. I'm so excited about that. Are you? You can consciously create the life that you want to live. You can consciously create the planet that you want to live on by consciously investing your spiritual assets. And I'm asking you to invest your spiritual assets right here at Unity of Bellevue. Well, that got a lot of silence. I didn't hear any applause at that one. I'm asking you to consider whether your heart is called to invest your spiritual assets, your inspiration, your purpose, your faith, your dreams right here at our center. I'm asking you to consider whether to invest your creativity right here at our center, your discernment, your empathy, your cultivated knowledge and skills. Will you invest those here in the form of sacred service to our community? Hallelujah, brothers and sisters. And here's what's great about this. I promise you that if you choose to make that investment here at our center, we will support you in doing the things that you got to do to develop these things. For example, we got to listen to our spiritual wisdom. That's our intuition and guidance gifts. We're going to help you listen. Creativity and imagination, we have to release our judgment. Oh yeah, we're going to help you release your judgment. I promise. Because when we get in community and we start working with one another, we start to experience judgment sometimes, don't we? So you'll have lots of opportunity to practice that. And how beautiful is that? Your character traits, we'll give you opportunities to ask yourself, what must I learn? And how am I going to learn that? And with the spiritual asset of cultivating skills and knowledge, we have tons of opportunities for you to take groups, to be in classes, to get prayer partners, to do all kinds of things. And so this is a great place for you to anchor in love and cultivate your unique expression of your spiritual assets. And I would like to actually ask to come to the front Ken and Patty McClellan right now, because they are going to share with you. I actually asked them to share. Oh, it looks like it's Ken McClellan, all right. Ken, and on behalf of Patty, come on up and grab this microphone. I asked them to share because this is a couple that I have watched in the 2 years. By the way, it's 2 years I've been part of this community this month. In the two... This is a couple that I watched in the 2 years that I have been part of this community invest their spiritual assets in Unity of Bellevue. And so I wanted to ask Ken to talk about that a little bit. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to talk for me and for Patty. Patty's a little more reticent than I am to stand up here and talk, so I will. Patty and I do what we do here for Unity of Bellevue because we love it. I mean, this has become our extended family. This is our family, our community, and like a family and like a community, it gives us great joy and pleasure in being able to do whatever we can do to help and enrich the center. I'm going to say when we first started coming here, like most people, we were really excited to find the lessons and stuff that you find here at Unity of Bellevue. And we came on Sunday mornings, we came to classes, we tried to apply what we were learning, and it was all good, but it didn't seem fully complete, like we weren't as engaged as we wanted to be. So I offered to usher first. I thought, well, I'll try ushering. And I found that when ushering, first of all, I got to meet some really neat people who were a part of that usher crew. I found when I was standing out at the door in front, I got some face recognition with more people in my community. And by just collecting the offering, and at that point the ushers did the counting and documenting too, which is no longer the case. But I felt a more critical part in the life flow of Unity of Bellevue. This is the finance, this is what's important. So I felt more a part of it. We then both began to greet at the door. And this was even better because now we got to get face recognition with all kinds of people.
Yeah.
And even more than that, we realized that we now had an opportunity or the power to create a great impression for Unity of Bellevue. People who are coming for the first time, your first impression of Unity of Bellevue is what you see coming through the door. And so you have a great deal of influence on what their experience becomes. Even those regulars, you can have an influence on their experience for the day. If you greet them with a smile, positive, happy, it affects their experience. So we felt an empowerment, and it made us feel good. Since that time, we've done a lot of other things. Patty tends to do more things that you don't necessarily see, but if you come here on a sunny weekday, you might see her out there weeding because we take pride in our physical center and want it to look good. She also coordinates the getting rides for people who need rides here, which you don't necessarily see. And I've done other things I do. Some of you may recall I served on the board for a while. I felt really good about what I did there. And I've been able to blend a passion for photography with things that I think enhances Unity of Bellevue by spreading the word. I don't know if you realize, but we've got, I think, almost 40 Unity churches and CSL churches across the country that follow us on Instagram, that keep track of what we're doing. In any event, this transition, in looking back, what was missing early on is we were receiving, we were taking all that we had learned and tried to apply it, but the cycle wasn't complete. We weren't given back. And by getting engaged and providing service, we feel like we can give back. And completing that circle has greatly enhanced our total spiritual experience and our spiritual enrichment. We do it because we give back. We love this place. It feels really good. We get a really great fuzzy feeling and feel very well connected to. And we get lots of hugs and we made a lot of wonderful friends. So that's why we do it, and that's why we love what we do.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ken. Give him some love. And I just have to add a quick word about the part that got kind of minimized a little bit there. Ken was on our board for 6 years. And he served with faith and with diligence and with grace. And I'm double, triple, quadruple grateful to him for all of that. Thank you, Ken. So do you have any spiritual assets you want to grow? Let's turn within. We'll do a little process here. See if we can't begin to focus in on your spiritual assets. So please join me. Take the sacred breath with me. Breathing in and breathing out. recognizing that we breathe the very breath of God. That the infinite something, the infinite energy that we call God is breathing us. It is beating our hearts. It is thinking us. It is moving us. There is only one life. And that life is God's life. It is the life of the infinite essence. And that life is my life. It is the life of each person in this room. We cannot be separate from the infinite mind and heart of the universe itself. And so breathing effortlessly and easily, take an opportunity to turn within and do a quick inventory, just a simple quick inventory. What are your spiritual assets? In the area of intuition and guidance, and what are your assets? And simply allow words or images to flow in your heart and in your mind as you make yourself available to the infinite intelligence of God. And turning to the area of creativity and imagination, what are your spiritual assets? How are you creative in the world? And what character traits do you particularly embody? Are you courageous? Are you particularly kind or compassionate? Are you discerning or empathetic? Or perhaps all of these and more? What character traits do you bring to making the world a better place? And finally, in the area of cultivated skills and knowledge, what are your spiritual assets? What have you been given? And as you look out on this banquet table of assets, spiritual gifts that lies in front of you, allow yourself to call forth one that is wanting to be further cultivated, wanting to grow, wanting to be expressed more fully as your life. Which of these spiritual assets wants to be activated now? And now begin to embody that asset and see yourself in the fulfillment of this vision for your life. Whatever it may be, you may see yourself returning to school. You may see yourself in a situation being more empathetic. You may see yourself anchoring in your life's purpose and living that out more fully. You may see yourself creating in some remarkable way. Whatever that is, simply begin to see yourself activating this spiritual asset in your life. And you notice what you're doing and where you are and who you're with as you become more of yourself in the world, more fully expressed, powered by love, anchored in the infinite mind and heart of God. And ask yourself now, what will I do today that will activate this spiritual gift? What is one thing I can do today to signal to that universal mind my willingness to live a more fulfilled and satisfying life, powered by love, anchored in spirit? And now give thanks for the wisdom and the vision that's been given you here. And bringing your attention again to your breath. Feeling your heart swell with gratitude for the infinite good that is unfolding as your life. Simply say yes. Simply say yes. And so I close this message with a grateful heart, knowing that as it is spoken, it is done. It is done in the mind of God, and so it is done in our lives now. I give thanks for it, and I let it be. And so it is. Amen.